The Galactic Council demanded 70% of everything humanity produced, plus control over our genetics. Earth's response wasn't negotiation, it was Project Exodus. When those doors sealed, Marcus Kane made a promise that would echo across the galaxy. When you realize what you've lost, you'll know where to find us. This is how humanity vanished from Council space and began building something they never saw coming. The encrypted transmission cycled through multiple authentication layers before reaching the secure chamber, where 3 humans sat waiting. On the main display, the Council delegates appeared not as holograms but as crystalline figures projecting absolute authority. Their terms came without preamble, each clause more invasive than the last. 70% of all production output, full genetic code oversight, mandatory breeding program controls to manage human population expansion. They spoke as if reading from an already signed document, their voices carrying the weight of galactic law. Marcus Kane's knuckles whitened as he gripped the datapad. The screen displayed the same terms in cold, precise text. Every demand aimed to dismantle human autonomy piece by piece. Admiral Torres sat motionless beside him, her eyes fixed on the delegates as they outlined reproductive controls that would have meant the end of human self-determination. Director Mitchell's expression gave nothing away, but his silence was a controlled burn. Historical precedent suggests dominant powers consistently underestimate emerging species during negotiations. The Council operated from a position of assumed superiority, their assessment of humanity frozen in time from first contact decades earlier. They saw a species grateful for inclusion in the galactic community, not one that had reverse-engineered their technology and improved upon it in secret. Their arrogance was a strategic blind spot, one the human delegation had anticipated. As the final term was delivered, a permanent Council oversight garrison on Earth, Marcus set the datapad down. The silence in the room stretched. Council delegates mistook it for shock or submission. They did not recognize it as the calm before a storm. Admiral Torres finally leaned forward, her voice cutting through the assumptions hanging in the air. The United Earth Directorate rejects these terms in their entirety. The crystalline figures seemed to shimmer with confusion. One delegate began to reiterate the non-negotiable nature of the demands. Marcus interrupted, his tone level. You misunderstand. We are not negotiating amendments. We are withdrawing from all galactic treaties, effective immediately. The shift in the room was palpable. The Council's projection flickered as security protocols redirected the signal. They had expected bargaining, not termination. This moment was more than a refusal. It was the unilateral revocation of centuries of carefully built dependencies. The Council's entire economic and security framework relied on human compliance. Their manufacturing efficiency, their research advancements, even their cultural stability had subtly integrated human innovation. The delegates seemed to realize this as the comms channel began to degrade. Their certainty wavered for the first time. Admiral Torres activated her personal comm. Initiate dispersal protocol. All units to Phase 1 positions. Outside the chamber, security teams moved to escort the Council's physical emissaries from Earth space. Their ships were rerouted to departure lanes under armed guard. The delegates protested, citing diplomatic immunity. They were met with silent, professional compliance from human personnel who had trained for this moment for years. On the bridge of the orbiting command ship, Admiral Torres watched the Council vessels retreat through the defense grid. Their signals were already being scrubbed from Earth's networks. Every shared database, every joint research initiative, every integrated defense protocol severed in a coordinated cutoff that left the Council side suddenly dark. The delegate's final transmission was a warning about consequences. It went unanswered. Marcus joined her on the bridge, looking down at Earth. They think we're committing economic suicide. They don't understand we've been building an exit strategy since the day we joined their community. The planet below seemed peaceful, but beneath the surface, thousands of operations were already in motion. Manufacturing hubs shifted production. Research facilities went offline. Transport networks rerouted. The Council's ultimatum had been the trigger, but the response had been engineered long before. Every demand they made had been war-gamed and countered in simulations. The genetic controls were the one line humanity could not cross. The biological sovereignty of the species was non-negotiable. That single item revealed the Council's true intent, not partnership but ownership. As the last council ship jumped to hyperspace, Torres turned to her communications officer. Send the execute command to all ARC stations. Authorization Torres 79 Exodus. Across the solar system, engines that had lain dormant for years activated. The great disappearance had begun. The command center lay beneath 3 kilometers of rock, accessible only through a series of encrypted transit tubes. Marcus Kane's biometric signature cleared the final airlock. Inside, Admiral Torres and Director Mitchell stood before a holographic star map that showed every human asset in Council space. Their expressions held no surprise, only the focused intensity of soldiers about to execute a long-prepared maneuver. Mitchell activated the primary console. Project Exodus is now active. All command nodes confirm readiness. The scale of what they initiated defied previous historical precedents for population relocation. This wasn't moving people from one continent to another. They were relocating millions across interstellar distances, while making an entire technological civilization vanish from galactic monitoring systems. Every movement needed to occur beneath sensor thresholds. Every transmission required encryption that even Council cryptographers couldn't break. The operation had no margin for error. Project Exodus transformed retreat into strategic repositioning. Instead of fleeing, humanity executed a controlled withdrawal to predetermined positions beyond Council reach. The ARCs weren't refugee ships but mobile command centers, each carrying complete industrial replication systems and genetic archives. Their dispersal patterns followed, mathematical models designed to appear random to observers while maintaining precise formation for rapid reassembly. Successful large-scale relocations throughout history share common elements: decentralized command structures, redundant systems, and psychological preparation of participants. Exodus incorporated all 3. Regional commanders operated with full autonomy once Phase 1 initiated. Every ship carried triple redundancy in navigation and life support. Civilian populations had been psychologically conditioned through years of subtle preparedness drills disguised as emergency response exercises. The operation involved thousands of coordinated movements across hundreds of light years. Transport ships departed manufacturing worlds on scheduled commercial routes, then diverted to hidden jump coordinates. Mining vessels on asteroid belts activated long dormant engines and began formation maneuvers. Even civilian liners carried hidden navigation packages that would trigger automatically when the execution signal arrived. Council traffic monitoring systems registered normal patterns, unaware they were watching the largest military evacuation in history. Phase 1 activated automated systems in deep space that had been constructed over 3 years. Hidden within nebulae, asteroid fields, and gravitational anomalies, these facilities represented humanity's greatest technological achievement. Self-replicating constructor platforms began assembling additional ARC ships using raw materials harvested from uninhabited systems. The operation's scale became apparent as hundreds of new vessels appeared on tracking displays, each moving with programmed precision. ARC ships began moving not as a panicked flight but as elements of a grand design. Their departure sequences followed precise timetables that accounted for Council patrol routes and monitoring satellite blind spots. Some ships executed short jumps to dead systems before making longer transitions. Others used gravitational slingshots around gas giants to achieve velocity, without detectable engine signatures. Each movement appeared isolated and insignificant to observers. Only the complete pattern revealed the coordinated exodus. Over 2.3 million humans were already in motion when the execution command finalized. The number represented essential personnel: engineers, scientists, military personnel, and genetic diversity carriers. They traveled aboard ships equipped with hibernation systems and neural training interfaces. Earth itself began its own disappearance procedures, activating planetary camouflage systems and redirecting deep core energy to cloaking projectors. The planet's energy signature dropped to pre-industrial levels across all spectrums. The message went out across quantum-entangled channels immune to Council interception. It carried no encryption because it required none. The die is cast. Begin Phase 1. Receiving stations across human space activated their protocols simultaneously. On mining colonies, workers entered ships that detached from asteroids they'd been supposedly excavating for years. On border outposts, defensive platforms powered down and began drifting as if abandoned. The disappearance began not with a declaration, but with 100,000 coordinated silences. Marcus watched the status reports flow across his display. Green indicators showed successful activations across 12 sectors. The Council's monitoring networks remained dark, their algorithms still processing normal traffic patterns from hours earlier. The time lag in their surveillance created a window of invisibility that Exodus exploited perfectly. By the time their systems registered anomalies, humanity would already be beyond effective pursuit range. Torres monitored the military components. Warships that had been posing as freighters shed their false hull sections. Patrol vessels that seemed to be on routine exercises changed vectors toward rally points. The fleet's dispersal followed contingency patterns drilled in secret for 5 years. Every captain knew their role without needing further instructions. The operation's success relied on executed planning rather than real-time commands. Mitchell's displays showed the cultural and scientific preservation efforts. Data arcs containing humanity's entire knowledge base began transmission to hidden receivers. Genetic banks with samples from every Earth species shifted to secure storage facilities. Archaeological treasures and cultural artifacts moved to radiation-shielded vaults beneath planetary surfaces. The preservation wasn't just about survival. It was about ensuring humanity's identity remained intact through whatever came next. The 3 leaders watched as the final confirmations arrived. Phase 1 complete. No turning back now. The galaxy would soon realize something fundamental had changed. But by then, humanity would be where they couldn't follow. Council monitoring stations first registered anomalous energy readings across 37 human systems. The signatures spiked for precisely 17 seconds before cutting to absolute zero. Automated alerts flooded regional command centers, but by the time analysts reviewed the data, entire sectors had gone silent. Shipping lanes showed no traffic. Communication relays answered only with automated system maintenance messages. Defense grids powered down to standby mode. The pattern suggested systemic failure rather than hostile action. Within 6 months, the disappearance reached completion. Human ships ceased transmitting identification codes. Colonies stopped sending regular status updates. Even automated mining operations on asteroids went dark, their machinery frozen in mid-operation. Scout ships sent to investigate found airlocks hanging open on stations, workstations still active with half-finished tasks. There were no signs of struggle, no evidence of attack, just perfect abandonment as if everyone had simply walked away from their posts. Strategic deception requires creating a plausible false narrative. Humanity manufactured evidence of catastrophic system failure across their territory. Decoy distress signals broadcast reports of cascade power failures and reactor meltdowns. False debris fields appeared on sensors where ships had supposedly suffered catastrophic engine failures. The evidence pointed to technological collapse, not organized withdrawal. Council investigators found environmental systems failing on abandoned stations, life support readings showing lethal atmospheres, and cargo holds filled with decaying supplies. The final image captured by Council observatories showed Earth itself receding. The planet's lights winked out continent by continent. Orbital platforms drifted away on calculated trajectories. The last ships jumped not toward any known colony or outpost, but to coordinates that matched no astrometric charts. Their jump signatures used modulation patterns that distorted tracking attempts. Navigation computers flagged the vectors as impossible, suggesting the ships had jumped into gravitational shear zones that should have torn them apart. This vanishing act demonstrated perfect operational security. Every human knew their role without needing to understand the full plan. Civilians entered hibernation chambers believing they were participating in emergency drills. Military personnel followed orders that seemed like routine exercises until the final execution command. The psychological preparation had been gradual, implemented through training scenarios and contingency protocols everyone assumed were theoretical. When the real event occurred, muscle memory took over where understanding might have caused hesitation. The silence that followed became a psychological weapon. Council command centers monitored empty channels, expecting negotiation attempts or surrender demands. Their tactical models predicted human ships would reappear once supplies ran low or systems failed. They anticipated desperation, not perfection. The complete absence of communication undermined strategic planning. Without signals to track, without movements to analyze, without even debris to examine, the Council faced an enemy that had become a void. Scout teams sent to human systems found eerie scenes of interrupted lives. Restaurants on orbital stations still had meals on tables, the food preserved by emergency containment fields. Manufacturing plants held half-assembled components, tools laid down as if workers would return any moment. The only things missing were all data storage devices, research materials, and any technology developed since humanity joined the Council. They took their knowledge with them, leaving behind only what the Council had already possessed. Military analysts noted the precision of the disappearance. Not a single ship was left behind. No stray communications leaked. No accidental transmissions gave away positions. The operation displayed coordination surpassing any fleet engagement in Council history. This suggested either perfect discipline or automated systems controlling the withdrawal. The latter possibility concerned strategists more. It implied humanity had achieved automation levels the Council considered theoretically impossible. The Council's initial confidence turned to unease, then concern, then genuine alarm. Their economic models began showing destabilization patterns as human-developed systems degraded without maintenance. Manufacturing efficiency dropped 17% in the first month alone. Research divisions reported impossible roadblocks without human scientists to solve advanced equations. The realization dawned that humanity hadn't just left. They'd taken the foundation of Council advancement with them. This silence represented more than military disappearance. It was the removal of an entire species' intellectual and technological contribution to galactic society. The Council had built their dominance on human innovation, while believing they controlled the innovators. Now they faced the consequences of that miscalculation. The void where humanity had been began affecting everything from trade routes to defensive capabilities. Systems that had relied on human maintenance started failing unpredictably. The final terrifying aspect was what the silence concealed. With no signals to track, no ships to follow, no colonies to monitor, humanity could be anywhere. They could be rebuilding. They could be advancing. They could be watching. Council strategic meetings began considering possibilities they'd previously dismissed as paranoid fantasy. Maybe humanity hadn't collapsed. Maybe they'd executed the most perfect strategic withdrawal in galactic history, and maybe they weren't finished. While the Council's search fleet scanned empty star systems, humanity was building its future in the gravitational shadows between galaxies. Automated signals from the departing Ark fleet awakened facilities that had lain dormant for years. These weren't colonies or outposts, they were forge worlds, massive industrial complexes designed for one purpose: revolutionary warship production on an unimaginable scale. The forge worlds emerged from hiding places Council science considered uninhabitable. They operated within nebular clouds that scrambled sensors, near gravitational anomalies that distorted scanning beams, and in the deep cold between stars where energy signatures dissipated into background noise. Their locations provided perfect environmental conditions for advanced manufacturing: stable temperatures for molecular assembly, minimal radiation interference for quantum-level construction, and absolute isolation from prying eyes. Each facility specialized in different technological sectors. One focused entirely on propulsion systems, mastering quantum vacuum thrusters that required zero reaction mass. Another perfected armor composites that could shift phase states under impact. A third developed weapons that manipulated fundamental forces rather than employing conventional energy discharge. This distributed specialization created a manufacturing network immune to single-point failure. If one facility fell silent, others could compensate within hours. Phase 3 completion signals echoed across the quantum network. Production capabilities now dwarfed anything the Council possessed. Automated foundries could manufacture capital ship hulls in days rather than years. Nanofabrication systems assembled components with atomic precision. The scale of output defied previous industrial paradigms. This wasn't incremental improvement but exponential advancement. The forge worlds represented aggressive preparation rather than passive hiding. Their construction cycles operated on 24-hour schedules, their robotic workforce never tiring, never erring. Raw materials came from automated mining operations on dead worlds, processed through molecular disassemblers that left no waste. Energy needs were met by tapping into quantum fluctuations rather than conventional reactors, making power generation virtually undetectable. Production runs consistently exceeded projections. The first Ghost-class ships began emerging from construction docks within months of the exodus. Their designs broke every known rule of spacecraft engineering. No bridge structures disrupted their smooth hull lines. No visible engine ports marred their surfaces. They looked less like warships and more like shards of darkness given purpose. These vessels incorporated technologies the Council's theoretical models claimed were impossible. Their propulsion systems didn't push against space but manipulated space-time itself. Their armor didn't absorb damage but redirected it through dimensional shifts. Their weapons didn't fire projectiles but induced localized physics failures in targets. The manufacturing process itself represented a revolution. Ships grew in molecular forges rather than being assembled from parts. Their systems integrated at quantum levels during formation, creating seamless structures without joints, seams, or failure points. Each vessel emerged complete, requiring no testing or calibration. Their creation process guaranteed perfection. Crew requirements were minimal. Neural interfaces allowed single operators to control entire ship systems. The vessels learned from their pilots, adapting their responses to individual neural patterns. This created combat capabilities that surpassed anything crewed by multiple operators. Reaction times approached instantaneous. Decision loops closed in microseconds. The Ghost-class ships began deployment exercises in hidden star systems. Their performance metrics shocked even their designers. During mock engagements against simulated Council fleets, they achieved annihilation ratios of 100 to 0. Not a single simulated weapon strike reached their hulls. Not a single tracking system managed to maintain target lock for more than milliseconds. Their stealth capabilities redefined the term. They didn't just avoid detection, they became undetectable. Sensor beams passed through them as through empty space. Energy signatures dissipated into background noise. Visual observation failed as light bent around their hulls. They were ghosts in the truest sense, present but unobservable. The production tempo increased exponentially. Within 6 months, the hidden docks were outputting destroyer-class vessels at a rate of 1 per day. Within a year, that number tripled. The manufacturing systems themselves improved through machine learning algorithms, each ship incorporating refinements based on previous models. This wasn't production, it was evolution. The Council continued searching empty space, their sensors scanning regions where humanity might have fled. They looked for refugee colonies, for struggling outposts, for signs of desperation. They found nothing because they were looking in the wrong places for the wrong things. Humanity wasn't hiding, it was building. And what it built would change the galaxy forever. In the hidden shipyards between galaxies, humanity wasn't just constructing vessels. They were reinventing warfare from quantum principles upward. The Ghost class emerged not from incremental design improvements but from fundamental physics breakthroughs the Council considered theoretical nonsense. Their very existence defied established combat doctrines, rendering centuries of tactical planning obsolete before firing a single shot. The neural command systems represented the first radical departure. Pilots interfaced directly with ship systems through cortical implants, their thoughts becoming commands. Reaction times dropped to near instantaneous levels as the delay between decision and execution vanished. The ships learned their pilots' patterns, anticipating maneuvers before conscious thought formed. This created combat capabilities that surpassed biological limits. A single human could now manage systems that would normally require 50 crew members. Quantum-locked armor presented the second revolution. The hull material existed in multiple dimensional states simultaneously, shifting phase in response to threats. Targeting systems found nothing to lock onto. Sensors detected empty space where ships visibly existed. Energy weapons passed through without resistance, their beams emerging unchanged from the opposite side. Physical projectiles encountered no impact resistance, their trajectories uninterrupted as if passing through holograms. The armor didn't deflect or absorb. It simply refused to interact with conventional weaponry. Weapon systems completed the paradigm shift. Instead of firing projectiles or energy beams, Ghost-class ships manipulated quantum entanglement states between themselves and targets. They induced localized physics failures in enemy vessels. Shields destabilized, engines lost containment, structural integrity fields collapsed. The attacks bypassed all known defensive measures because they didn't confront defenses. They altered the fundamental rules those defenses relied upon. Historical analysis of military revolutions shows that true advantage comes from changing the combat paradigm rather than improving existing systems. The Ghost class didn't fight better, it fought differently. Council tactical databases contained no countermeasures because they couldn't model the combat environment. Their simulations assumed certain physical constants that these vessels routinely violated. Engagement projections returned error messages instead of battle outcomes. The first combat tests occurred in asteroid fields far from Council monitoring. Mock engagements pitted Ghost-class destroyers against simulated Council battle groups. The results were consistently one-sided. Not a single simulated weapon strike registered on the Ghost ships. Their evasion patterns didn't follow predictable Newtonian physics. They appeared to teleport short distances, though sensors confirmed they never actually left normal space. Targeting solutions that should have required seconds to compute happened in milliseconds. Weapons testing produced even more startling results. The quantum entanglement weapons disabled simulated targets without visible damage. Shield generators failed despite full power readings. Engine cores shut down without overheating. Weapon systems went offline while showing optimal status. The attacks didn't destroy, they incapacitated systems at fundamental levels. Recovery required complete power cycling and hardware resetting, impossible during combat. The tactical implications became clear during mass engagement simulations. A single Ghost-class ship could engage 10 Council vessels simultaneously without taking fire. Their evasion patterns created targeting nightmares. Ships would be in one position when weapons fired and another when the attack arrived. The phase-shifting armor meant that even lucky shots passed through harmlessly. Council vessels exhausted their ammunition against targets they couldn't hit or affect. Command and control systems represented another advantage. The neural interfaces allowed fleet-wide coordination without communication delays. Pilots shared tactical awareness directly through their ships, creating a distributed consciousness across the battle group. Maneuvers synchronized perfectly across light seconds of space. The fleet moved like a single organism with thousands of limbs. Each action perfectly coordinated without lag. Council tactical analysts would have classified the Ghost class as impossible based on their understanding of physics. The energy requirements for phase shifting alone exceeded what their science considered feasible for ship-sized objects. The quantum manipulation weapons defied conservation of energy principles. The navigation systems violated known limits on acceleration and momentum. Every aspect challenged established scientific dogma. These ships became the foundation of a fleet that operated on completely unequal terms. They didn't outfight opponents, they made opposition meaningless. Traditional measures of combat power, firepower, shield, speed, became irrelevant against vessels that changed the rules of engagement. The very concept of space combat required redefinition when facing ships that couldn't be detected, targeted, or damaged by conventional means. The final test involved a full simulated Council fleet, carriers, destroyers, frigates, and support vessels. The Ghost-class engagement lasted 17 seconds. Every hostile vessel was disabled without a single defensive action being taken. The after-action report showed perfect mission success, all objectives achieved, 0 casualties, no damage sustained. The simulation computers initially flagged the results as erroneous before verifying their accuracy. This revolutionary capability came with strategic implications beyond mere combat superiority. The Ghost class could approach any Council position undetected, disable defenses without destruction, and withdraw without pursuit. They could neutralize fleets without causing casualties, dismantle infrastructure without collateral damage, and demonstrate overwhelming force without firing a single shot in anger. The psychological impact of such capability would outweigh any physical threat. Humanity's exile from Council. Space sent ripples through galactic politics that reached species the Council had long ignored or exploited. The Kaith, whose homeworld had been stripped of exotic matter deposits. The Torvin Collective, whose group consciousness violated Council individuality laws. The Rift Dancers, hunted nearly to extinction for their ability to manipulate dimensional boundaries. These species watched humanity's disappearance with more than curiosity. They saw strategic opportunity in the Council's overreach. Each possessed unique capabilities that the Council had either exploited or suppressed. The Kaith could stabilize exotic matter states that conventional physics deemed unstable. The Torvin maintained instantaneous communication across light years through their distributed neural networks. The Rift Dancers could create localized space-time anomalies that made traditional navigation impossible. Individually, they lacked the organization to challenge Council authority. Together, guided by human strategic planning, they formed something unprecedented. Humanity reached out through secure quantum channels that the Council couldn't monitor. The initial contacts were cautious. Species that had been betrayed before trusted no one easily. Marcus Kane personally negotiated with Caith representatives, offering shared technology in exchange for their exotic matter expertise. Admiral Torres met with Torvan envoys, demonstrating how their neural networks could coordinate entire fleets without light-speed delays. Director Mitchell worked with Rift Dancer elders, showing how their abilities could create tactical advantages no Council fleet could counter. The Terra Defense Alliance emerged not as a human-led coalition but as a fully integrated force. Humanity provided the organizational structure, command protocols, logistical systems, strategic planning frameworks. The other species contributed their unique capabilities without having to conform to Council-imposed limitations. This wasn't about assimilation but synthesis, with each species operating at their maximum potential within a unified command structure. Caith engineers revolutionized weapons and defense systems. They created armor that incorporated exotic matter states, allowing ships to phase through conventional attacks. Their weapons induced controlled quantum collapses in target systems, disabling vessels without destruction. The technology operated on principles the Council's science considered theoretically impossible, making their defenses useless against it. Torvan neural networks solved the lightspeed delay problem that had limited fleet coordination across stellar distances. Their distributed consciousness allowed instant communication between ships regardless of separation. Tactical updates propagated through the fleet faster than sensors could detect threats. Command decisions reached every vessel simultaneously, creating coordination that appeared precognitive to outside observers. Rift Dancers transformed space combat doctrine. They could create localized spatial distortions that twisted attack vectors away from friendly ships. Their temporal manipulation abilities allowed brief moments of accelerated perception during combat, turning seconds into subjective minutes for planning and response. Traditional fleet formations became obsolete. Against opponents who could alter the battlefield's fundamental geometry, successful multi-species alliances throughout history share common requirements, clear command structures, mutually beneficial technology sharing, and respect for cultural differences. The Alliance implemented these principles through adaptive systems that accommodated different physiologies, thought patterns, and operational preferences. Human organizers created flexible frameworks rather than rigid protocols, allowing each species to contribute in their optimal manner. The integration process revealed unexpected synergies. Caith exotic matter systems worked better when installed on ships with Rift Dancer-modified hull geometries. Torvan neural networks achieved higher efficiency when coordinating fleets that included Caith-enhanced sensors. Each technological improvement amplified the others, creating systems that were more than the sum of their parts. Training exercises showed the Alliance's potential. Mixed-species crews operated Ghost-class ships with efficiency rates that exceeded human-only configurations. Caith weapons officers achieved targeting precision that defied sensor limitations. Torvan communications specialists maintained fleet-wide awareness that prevented tactical surprises. Rift Dancer pilots executed maneuvers that should have been physically impossible. Ambassador Nixara observed the emerging force with professional detachment that gradually shifted to admiration. The Voidwalker species had remained neutral in galactic conflicts for centuries, but even they recognized something unprecedented was forming. Nixara's assessment noted that humanity hadn't simply allied with outcasts, they had unified them into a single strategic entity. The organizational skills that made human civilization efficient now maximized the combined potential of multiple species. The Terra Defense Alliance became a force that operated on completely different principles than the Council's military. Their strength came from diversity rather than uniformity, from adaptation rather than doctrine, from cooperation rather than command. Each species contributed what they did best without being forced into roles that didn't suit their capabilities. This integrated approach extended beyond military matters. Scientific research accelerated as different perspectives solved problems that had stalled under Council-approved methodologies. Engineering breakthroughs occurred when Caith material science combined with human design principles, and Rift Dancer spatial manipulation. The Alliance was building not just a military force but a complete civilization based on complementary strengths. Rather than imposed conformity, the Council continued to view the galaxy through their established hierarchy of species, dominant races, client states, and marginal outliers. They failed to recognize that the outliers, properly organized and equipped, could become more formidable than any traditional power. Their arrogance blinded them to the possibility that those they dismissed might unite under competent leadership. As the Alliance's capabilities grew, their confidence solidified. They weren't hiding from the Council anymore. They were preparing to offer the galaxy an alternative to Council domination. The marginalized species found not just protection, but purpose in this new arrangement. For the first time, they weren't fighting for survival but building something worth defending. 18 months after humanity vanished, the Galactic Council's economy began showing fractures. Trade networks that depended on human technology started failing at critical junctures. Automated shipping lanes developed coordination errors that caused cascading delays. Manufacturing hubs reported efficiency drops of nearly 18% as optimization algorithms created by human engineers degraded without maintenance. The systems weren't just breaking, they were forgetting how to function properly. Technological advancement stalled across Council member worlds. Research divisions hit impossible roadblocks without human scientists to solve advanced equations. Projects that had been nearing completion suddenly lacked the final components only human researchers could provide. The Council's innovation pipeline, once driven by human creativity, now produced only minor iterations of existing technology. The galactic community was running on intellectual capital that had suddenly been withdrawn. This economic vulnerability demonstrated the danger of over-reliance on a single species' capabilities. The Council had integrated human technology so thoroughly that their infrastructure couldn't operate without it. Manufacturing systems required human-designed calibration routines. Energy distribution networks needed human-created balancing algorithms. Even communication systems depended on human-developed encryption protocols. The removal of one species caused failures across multiple sectors simultaneously. Council leadership held emergency sessions as the scale of the problem became apparent. Prime Orbiter Veltar acknowledged the human problem had become a full-scale crisis. Their internal reports showed alarming instability across critical infrastructure. Power grids on member worlds experienced unexplained fluctuations. Transport systems developed coordination errors that caused accidents. The very foundation of their civilization was showing stress fractures. Meanwhile, unknown attackers began striking outer rim worlds with precision raids. These weren't pirate attacks or border skirmishes. The raiders used advanced technologies the Council couldn't identify or counter. Their ships appeared without warning, struck specific targets, and vanished before defense forces could respond. The attacks showed tactical sophistication that suggested thorough intelligence gathering and careful planning. The raids targeted infrastructure that was already weakened by the economic downturn. Shipping depots exploded from internal system failures rather than external attacks. Power transfer stations went offline due to control system corruption. The pattern suggested the attackers understood exactly where the Council was most vulnerable and how to exploit those weaknesses most effectively. Council defense fleets found themselves chasing ghosts. Their sensors detected anomalous readings that vanished before confirmation. Their weapon systems locked onto targets that didn't exist according to tactical databases. The unknown attackers operated outside established combat doctrines, using methods that defied conventional military analysis. Their capabilities suggested technological advancement beyond Council understanding. The realization dawned that removing humanity hadn't eliminated the threat it had created, a power vacuum filled by something more dangerous. The Council's dominance had been a facade supported by the very species they tried to control. Without human technology maintaining their systems and human innovation driving progress, their civilization was experiencing systemic failure. The attacks from unknown forces accelerated this decline, creating a multi-front crisis. Internal economic collapse combined with external military threats created a situation the Council hadn't faced in centuries. Member worlds began withholding resources, fearing they might need them for their own protection. Trade agreements broke down as trust in Council protection eroded. The unified galactic community that had existed for generations started fragmenting along species lines. The Council's military found itself stretched thin, responding to both internal crises and external attacks. Fleet deployments became reactive rather than proactive. Command centers struggled to prioritize threats when everything seemed to be failing simultaneously. The strain showed in missed response times and inadequate resource allocation. The once unstoppable Council military machine was showing signs of systemic overload. Economic analysts presented grim projections showing the collapse wasn't temporary. The systems weren't just broken, they couldn't be fixed without human expertise. Alternative solutions required technological capabilities the Council no longer possessed. The very knowledge needed to maintain their civilization had walked away with the species they'd tried to control. This wasn't a problem that could be solved with existing resources. The attacks on Outer Rim worlds increased in frequency and sophistication. The unknown attackers seemed to be testing Council responses, mapping defensive capabilities and identifying weaknesses. Their methods showed perfect understanding of Council tactical doctrines and technological limitations. Each raid provided them with more data, while further eroding Council confidence. Council leadership faced the uncomfortable truth that their dominance had been an illusion sustained by others' contributions. They hadn't built their civilization, they'd managed it using capabilities provided by species they considered inferior. Without those contributions, the entire structure was unraveling. The human problem had become a galactic crisis with no apparent solution. The once stable galaxy now faced internal collapse and external threats simultaneously. Council ships patrolled empty space looking for enemies they couldn't find, while their own world suffered infrastructure failures they couldn't fix. The balance of power had shifted, and the Council was only beginning to understand how completely they'd lost control of the situation they themselves had created. The first alert came from deep space monitoring stations. 1,000 unidentified contacts materialized from the void between galaxies. They appeared on Council sensors without transition. No energy buildup, no warp signatures, just sudden presence where empty space had been moments before. Their configurations matched no known ship designs in the galactic database. The fleet moved as a single entity, their formation so precise it suggested centralized control beyond any current technology. Council defense grids activated emergency protocols. Battle groups scrambled to intercept. The unknown fleet continued its advance toward the galactic core, ignoring hails and warning shots. Their energy signatures defied classification. Readings fluctuated between impossible states, sometimes showing multiple power sources, other times registering as background noise. Sensor operators struggled to maintain tracking as the contacts shifted between detectable and undetectable states. The first engagement occurred near the border world of Kethra. Council destroyers moved to block the advance. Before they could form defensive lines, the lead enemy ships phased through their formation. Council weapons fire passed through the invaders without effect. Shields registered no impacts. Energy readings showed no weapon discharges from the hostile vessels. Yet Council ships began experiencing catastrophic system failures. The destroyer Inevitable Conquest was among the first casualties. Its shields remained at full strength when main power failed. Engine containment fields collapsed without warning. Life support systems shut down across all decks. The ship went dark and adrift within seconds, its crew unable to comprehend what had attacked them. Rescue ships reported no visible damage, just complete systems failure as if the ship had been turned off at the source. Attack patterns showed chilling precision. Strikes came from angles that should have been impossible given the fleet's formation. Weapons targeted specific systems rather than attempting destruction. Communications arrays failed across entire battle groups. Navigation systems developed critical errors. Power distribution networks experienced cascade failures. The attackers demonstrated perfect understanding of Council technology and its weaknesses. Military analysts recognized this as technological asymmetry rather than numerical advantage. The enemy wasn't just better equipped, they operated on different combat principles. Their tactics exploited physical laws the Council considered theoretical. Their weapons manipulated quantum states rather than delivering kinetic or energy damage. Defense became impossible when the rules of engagement had changed completely. Dr. Istanol studied the sensor data with growing apprehension. The crystalline scientist's assessment confirmed the worst fears. They have weaponized quantum mechanics in ways our theoretical models claimed were impossible. The statement carried weight coming from the Council's chief scientific advisor. His analysis showed the attackers could manipulate dimensional boundaries, create localized physics violations, and induce quantum collapse events in target systems. Council leadership received the reports with mounting concern. This wasn't random piracy or border skirmishes. The attacks showed clear pattern and purpose. Each engagement provided the invaders with more data about Council capabilities and responses. They were mapping defensive networks, testing reaction times, and identifying command structures. The precision suggested intelligence gathering rather than conquest attempts. The unknown fleet operated with strategic patience that unnerved military planners. They didn't press advantages or attempt territory capture. They struck specific targets, gathered data, and withdrew before reinforcements arrived. Their movements created maximum disruption with minimal exposure. Each attack revealed another layer of Council vulnerability, while revealing nothing about the attacker's own limitations. Defense commanders found themselves reacting to threats they couldn't understand. Traditional tactical doctrines proved useless against opponents who ignored physics constants. Weapons designed to penetrate shields were ineffective against targets that phased between dimensional states. Sensors couldn't track ships that existed in multiple quantum possibilities simultaneously. The technological gap was becoming a chasm. The attacks increased in frequency and sophistication. Border worlds reported system failures that spread like viruses through their networks. Supply depots experienced coordinated shutdowns that stranded entire fleets. Communication relays developed anomalies that corrupted data streams. The Council's military infrastructure was being systematically probed and weakened, without a single ship being destroyed in combat. Private assessments among Council leadership acknowledged this was preparation for something larger. The mapping of weaknesses, the testing of responses, the careful avoidance of permanent damage, all pointed toward a final confrontation being planned. The attackers were studying their opponent with scientific precision, identifying every point of failure before applying decisive pressure. The galaxy held its breath as the unknown fleet continued its methodical advance. Each system they passed through experienced temporary disruptions that revealed critical vulnerabilities. The Council's technological superiority, once taken for granted, was being systematically dismantled by an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't track, and couldn't understand. The preparation phase was nearing completion, and what would follow remained uncertain. The transmission appeared simultaneously across every Council emergency frequency. Admiral Torres's face filled command screens, her features hardened by years of preparation. Her eyes showed no anger, only the calm certainty of someone delivering unavoidable facts. The broadcast originated from Earth, the planet they'd tried to control now speaking as an equal. Her voice carried no diplomatic pleasantries, no room for interpretation. The message bypassed all Council security protocols. It appeared on bridge displays, personal communicators, even public information screens. The signal used quantum entanglement principles the Council couldn't block or trace. Every word reached its audience without distortion or delay. This technical demonstration alone confirmed the sender's superiority. They could communicate when and where they chose, with no possibility of interception. Her terms were absolute. Complete surrender, dissolution of the current government structure, public trials for war criminals. The demands came not as opening positions for negotiation, but as non-negotiable requirements. She spoke with the authority of someone stating established facts rather than making requests. The tone left no doubt that refusal would have immediate consequences. The alliance offered transition to a new galactic confederation based on equality rather than domination. This wasn't conquest but reformation. Member species would retain sovereignty while participating in shared defense and economic systems. The proposal emphasized mutual respect and cooperation over the Council's hierarchical control. It presented surrender not as defeat, but as opportunity for a more equitable future. Psychological analysis indicates ultimatums succeed when delivered from positions of undeniable strength. Torres's message demonstrated both military superiority and moral authority. She referenced the Council's exploitation of marginalized species, their suppression of technological advancement, their history of enforced compliance. The framing made resistance seem not just futile but morally indefensible. The Council's response echoed their outdated mindset. They requested parley, assuming this was another negotiation where compromise would follow. Their transmission spoke of discussion periods and negotiation frameworks. They failed to recognize that the power dynamic had permanently shifted. Their response showed they still believed in their ability to control outcomes through diplomatic maneuvering. Torres's reply took 7 minutes to arrive. It contained no acknowledgement of their request for discussion. She repeated the terms with added precision: 24 hours for compliance, specific coordinates for surrender proceedings, clear instructions for disarmament procedures. Her tone remained calm but carried finality. This wasn't opening position. It was closing argument. The Alliance framed their offer as moral necessity. They emphasized avoiding unnecessary destruction. They provided detailed transition plans that protected civilian populations. The message gave Council species dignity and surrender by offering them participation in the new order. This approach recognized that even defeated opponents require pathways to maintain honor. The coordinates provided led to neutral space near the former human border. The message specified which ships could attend, how many representatives each species could send, what security protocols would apply. The details showed thorough planning and complete confidence. They weren't guessing about procedure. They were implementing established plans. The warning about consequences was precise and measurable. Systematic dismantling of military infrastructure, targeted disabling of strategic assets, no threat against civilian populations or non-military systems. The consequences focused exclusively on capabilities rather than punishment. This demonstrated strategic discipline and moral consistency. Council command centers fell into tense silence after the transmission ended. Officers watched their superiors for reactions. The reality settled across command decks. This wasn't another border dispute or diplomatic crisis. This was fundamental change delivered as ultimatum. The old rules no longer applied. Military analysts studied the broadcast technical aspects. The signal penetration showed communication capabilities beyond Council understanding. The simultaneous appearance on all channels demonstrated network infiltration at deepest levels. The message's unbreakable encryption confirmed technological superiority in multiple domains. Political advisors recognized the strategic brilliance of the offer. By framing surrender as transition to equality, the Alliance made resistance seem selfish rather than patriotic. By offering participation in the new order, they gave Council species something to gain rather than just something to lose. The psychological pressure was carefully calibrated. The galaxy watched Council leadership for their response. Every species understood this moment would define the next 1,000 years. Would they acknowledge reality or choose destruction? The answer would come within 24 hours. The countdown began on screens across known space. Torres's final image remained frozen on displays. A commander who had vanished and returned transformed. Her expression showed no triumph, only resolve. She had delivered the message. The choice now belonged to others. The wait began. The Council's silence stretched beyond the deadline. Their command centers waited, expecting negotiation, compromise. Some returned to the old rules of engagement. They didn't understand the nature of the new reality. In response, 50 Ghost-class destroyers phased into view near Nexus Station, the most fortified position in Council space. Their arrival triggered immediate defensive protocols. Shield grids activated. Weapon turrets swung toward the contacts. Patrol ships moved to intercept. The Council expected a conventional fleet engagement, something their tactical databases could analyze and counter. The Ghost ships didn't return fire. They didn't maneuver into attack formations. They simply vanished from sensors. One moment they filled tactical displays, the next they were gone. Council targeting systems lost lock. Scanners showed empty space where ships had been seconds earlier. Then the Ghosts reappeared inside defensive perimeters, having bypassed every outer layer of protection. They hovered near critical station systems without triggering a single alarm. Their presence demonstrated that the Council's defenses were meaningless against their capabilities. Kaith exotic matter weapons activated next. They didn't fire projectiles or energy beams. They created localized gravitational anomalies that disrupted station systems without causing physical damage. Power conduits fluctuated. Communication arrays went offline. Engine rooms reported temporary loss of containment field stability. The attacks were surgical and precise, disabling Nexus Station's operational capabilities without harming personnel or infrastructure. The message was clear. They could have destroyed everything, but chose not to. Rift dancers manipulated space around the station. Defense turrets found their firing solutions constantly shifting as spatial geometry twisted around them. Patrol ships attempting to intercept encountered navigational anomalies that made simple maneuvers impossible. The Alliance struck from angles Fang Yu systems couldn't comprehend or counter. Their attacks followed patterns that defied three-dimensional combat doctrine. Council tactical officers watched their displays in confusion as their own systems seemed to work against them. Tactical analysis of military history shows that demonstrating superiority without excessive destruction often leads to faster surrender than outright conquest. The Alliance applied this principle with precision. They proved they could have annihilated Nexus Station and its defending fleet, but instead showed only the futility of resistance. Each disabled system, each bypassed defense, each impossible maneuver delivered the same message. Your technology is obsolete, your tactics are predictable, your position is untenable. The demonstration lasted precisely 27 minutes. In that time, Nexus Station was rendered completely defenseless without suffering a single casualty or structural breach. Their weapon systems were offline. Their communications were jammed. Their engines were disabled. The station floated helplessly while ghost ships maintained positions around it like silent sentinels. Council commanders watched their status displays shift from green to red across all systems, then back to green as the Alliance restored functionality. Admiral Torres's voice broke the silence on all channels. She spoke with calm authority, stating that the Alliance could have annihilated the Council's fleet, but chose instead to offer the same choice humanity had been given: surrender with dignity or face the consequences. Her message emphasized that this wasn't about conquest, but about establishing a new galactic order based on equality, rather than domination. The framing gave Council forces a path to surrender that maintained their honor while acknowledging the new reality. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. Council officers who had trained their entire careers for conventional space combat faced an enemy that operated outside all known tactical paradigms. Their weapons couldn't target these ships, their sensors couldn't track them, their defenses couldn't stop them. The demonstration didn't just show technological superiority, it showed complete transcendence of the Council's understanding of warfare. Within hours, the Council began transition procedures. Commanders who had been prepared to fight to the last ship now recognized the futility of resistance. The demonstration achieved what years of combat could not: acceptance of inevitable change. Emergency sessions were convened. Transmission lines buzzed with revised orders. Defense fleets were recalled from alert status. The shift from defiance to compliance happened with startling speed once the reality became undeniable. The Alliance's approach reflected strategic brilliance beyond mere military capability. By choosing demonstration over destruction, they preserved infrastructure that would be needed for the coming transition. By avoiding casualties, they reduced resentment and resistance among Council personnel. By showcasing their capabilities without unleashing their full destructive potential, they made surrender seem like the only rational choice rather than a defeat. The psychological victory was complete and irreversible. Nexus Station became the symbol of the new galactic order. Its commanding officer publicly acknowledged the need for change, becoming the first high-ranking Council official to advocate for surrender. His conversion influenced countless others who had been hesitant to accept the new reality. The station itself would later become the site of the first Galactic Confederation assembly, its defenses permanently deactivated as a symbolic gesture of the new era of cooperation. The demonstration had transformed a fortress of the old order into a monument to the new. The surrender ceremony took place aboard the former Council flagship, now neutral ground. Representatives from over 200 species filled the observation deck, their varied physiologies creating a mosaic of galactic diversity. Former outcasts stood beside former rulers, all granted equal standing under the new protocols. The air carried the tension of centuries-old hierarchies dissolving in real time. Council banners were lowered as Confederation symbols activated on every display. This wasn't just political change, it was cultural transformation on a galactic scale. The Galactic Confederation's founding charter replaced domination with equality as its core principle. Governance structures ensured proportional representation regardless of technological advancement or military power. Economic systems prioritized shared prosperity over exploitation of weaker species. The framework acknowledged past injustices while creating mechanisms for forward progress. This approach recognized that successful political transitions require both structural change and psychological acceptance across all participating groups. Admiral Torres assumed the role of Supreme Coordinator through unanimous consent. Her command position utilized neural network technology to maintain constant connection with all member species. This distributed representation system allowed real-time consensus building without light-speed delays. Her leadership style emphasized facilitation over command, guidance over control. The neural interfaces enabled seamless translation between species, eliminating communication barriers that had previously fueled misunderstandings and conflicts. The Helix builders emerged from their isolation to join the Confederation as full members. Their molecular engineering expertise immediately benefited infrastructure projects across member worlds. Previously hidden species who had avoided Council contact now participated openly, bringing unique perspectives and capabilities. This inclusion demonstrated the Confederation's commitment to valuing all contributions regardless of origin. The gathering of so many diverse species in one cooperative framework was unprecedented in galactic history. Reparations. Programs began transferring resources and technology to species exploited under Council rule. Genetic archives were returned to their original creators. Cultural artifacts taken during expansion periods were repatriated. Economic balances were restored through carefully calculated resource allocations. These actions addressed historical injustices while building trust in the new system. The process acknowledged that healing centuries of exploitation required tangible acts of restoration, not just symbolic gestures. Governance analysis indicates that successful political transformations require addressing both institutional frameworks and collective psychology. The Confederation implemented parallel processes, establishing new governing structures while fostering cultural shift through education and shared projects. Member species participated in cross-cultural exchanges that replaced old prejudices with mutual understanding. Joint scientific initiatives created common purpose that transcended historical divisions. The Confederation's economic systems were redesigned from first principles. Resource distribution followed need-based allocation rather than power-based control. Technological advancements were shared openly rather than hoarded for strategic advantage. Trade networks operated on transparent algorithms that prevented the exploitation patterns common under Council management. This economic fairness created stability that political agreements alone could never achieve. Military forces were reconfigured as defensive networks rather than instruments of dominance. Ghost-class technology was shared with all member species, creating mutual protection capabilities that made aggression against any member impractical. The Terra Defense Alliance evolved into a Confederation-wide security force with representatives from every species. This collective security arrangement eliminated the need for individual species to maintain independent military forces. Cultural integration became a priority through shared projects and exchanges. The former Council headquarters was transformed into a museum, documenting the transition from domination to cooperation. Educational programs taught the history of all species rather than just the dominant ones. Artistic collaborations created works that celebrated diversity rather than uniformity. These efforts built the psychological foundation for lasting unity. The statement, "The old galaxy was gone forever, and something far better had taken its place," became the defining assessment of the transition. It acknowledged the completeness of the change while recognizing the improvement it represented. This wasn't modification of existing systems but replacement with fundamentally different principles. The Confederation represented not just new governance but new possibilities for galactic civilization. Humanity's role evolved from strategic leadership to catalytic facilitation. Their understanding of both Council thinking and outsider perspectives made them ideal coordinators during the transition. They advocated for species rights while ensuring practical governance mechanisms were established. Their patience during exile had been rewarded with the opportunity to help build something truly equitable. The marginal status they had endured became the perspective that enabled genuine inclusion. The Confederation's success demonstrated that unity could achieve what domination never could. By valuing every species' contributions, they created capabilities exceeding anything the Council had possessed. By building on cooperation rather than control, they established foundations that would endure for generations. The galaxy had finally moved beyond the cycle of dominance and resistance that had characterized its entire history until this moment. The archives of the new Confederation now hold humanity's simple promise as a foundational document. The statement, "When you realize what you've lost, you'll know where to find us," transformed from defiant remark to precise prophecy. The Council eventually comprehended their loss wasn't merely technological, but existential. They had sacrificed the innovative drive that sustained their civilization. Their systems degraded without human-maintained algorithms. Their research stalled without human creativity. Their military doctrine crumbled against tactics they couldn't comprehend. The very foundation of their dominance had been borrowed without acknowledgement. True strength revealed itself through unity rather than domination. The alliance demonstrated that cooperation multiplies capabilities beyond mere numerical advantage. Different species working in concert achieved what isolated groups could not. This approach created resilience through diversity. If one system failed, others compensated. If one technology encountered limitations, alternative methods provided solutions. The collaborative model proved more adaptable and sustainable than any centralized control structure. Psychological patterns show societies built on fear eventually consume themselves. The Council's rigid hierarchy created internal tensions that weakened their responses. Member species withheld resources during crisis. Command structures hesitated to share information across branches. This internal friction made them vulnerable to external pressure. Their system contained the seeds of its own destruction. The very controls they imposed created weaknesses that could be exploited. Humanity's organizational capacity became the catalyst for transformation. They provided the structural framework that allowed diverse species to contribute their unique strengths. The Caith applied exotic matter manipulation to defense systems. The Torvan networks enabled instantaneous fleet coordination. Rift dancers created tactical advantages through spatial manipulation. Each capability enhanced the others when properly integrated. This synergy produced results that exceeded any single species' potential. The alliance demonstrated that effective collaboration creates outcomes greater than individual contributions. Their combined technologies produced systems that defied conventional analysis. Their shared strategies developed approaches that traditional military science couldn't counter. Their integrated command structure responded with coordination that appeared telepathic to observers. This collective capability made resistance futile without requiring overwhelming force. The galaxy redefined itself around cooperative principles rather than conquest. The new Confederation established systems based on mutual benefit rather than exploitation. Resource distribution followed need rather than power. Technological advancement served collective progress rather than strategic advantage. This shift in fundamental principles created stability that coercion never achieved. A peaceful galactic order emerged from the Council's collapsed hierarchy. The transition involved careful restructuring rather than violent overthrow. Systems were redesigned to prevent concentration of power. Checks and balances ensured all species maintained voice and representation. The framework emphasized prevention of past abuses while enabling future progress. Humanity's promise was fulfilled exactly as stated. When the Council realized what they had lost, the innovation, the coordination, the drive that powered their civilization, they found humanity precisely where indicated, leading a coalition of former outcasts toward a better future. The location wasn't geographical but philosophical. They found humanity at the forefront of a new galactic paradigm. The organizational skills humanity provided proved more valuable than any single technology. They created systems that harmonized different biological needs, communication styles, and operational preferences. They designed interfaces that translated between incompatible technologies. They established protocols that respected cultural differences while achieving common goals. This facilitation ability transformed marginalization into leadership. The Confederation's success validated the collaborative model's sustainability. Member species contributed voluntarily rather than through coercion. Systems operated through consensus rather than command. Progress occurred through shared inspiration rather than concentrated research. This approach created organic stability that enforced order never achieved. The transformation demonstrated that true power resides in building rather than breaking. The Alliance constructed new systems while the Council tried to preserve old ones. They created alternatives while their opponents defended limitations. This forward orientation made resistance seem increasingly pointless as advantages accumulated. Humanity's journey from marginalization to leadership illustrated how perspective gained through adversity can become strategic advantage. Understanding both Council thinking and outsider experiences allowed them to bridge divides others couldn't cross. This dual awareness informed every aspect of the new galactic structure. The archives preserve the promise as a reminder that strength comes in many forms. Technological superiority matters less than organizational capability. Military power proves less durable than collaborative networks. Control ultimately fails where cooperation endures. These lessons now form the foundation of galactic civilization. The Confederation continues evolving, but the core principle remains unchanged. Unity creates strength that domination never can. Species once exploited now contribute as equals. Technologies once hoisted now serve common progress. Systems once rigid now adapt to new challenges. The galaxy has learned that true advancement comes from building together. Earth's exodus and return proved that lasting strength isn't seized, it's built. Through unity and mutual respect, humanity and its allies forged a new galactic order from the ashes of control and fear. Their success reminds us that the courage to walk away from unjust systems can be the first step toward true transformation. The galaxy continues evolving on foundations of collaboration, not coercion. Remember, genuine power doesn't lie in ruling over others but in rising together. The promise was kept. When they realized what was lost, humanity was exactly where they said they'd be.